Good afternoon. I know you're all looking forward to promises to be a very historic night for the nation and for this president. The president is very excited to make his announcement of the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court later this evening. According to some polls, and you know we love polls around here, for 70% of the voters, President's choice for Supreme Court was an important factor in their choice of the ballot box in November. For more than 1 in 5, it was the most important factor. Tonight, he will formally present his nominee to the American people, and I can assure you that this individual will make those voters and every American very, very proud. This particular choice is one that the president takes very seriously. He knows it will impact the course of our country's jurisprudence for generations to come. As such, he's taken careful steps to ensure that this process has both been transparent and inclusive. He has been speaking about the list of individuals that he may nominate since May of this year, and after consulting with several influential groups, released a definitive list of 21 in September, pledging that his nominee will solely come from that list. He sought the advice and consent of both Republicans and Democrats senators throughout this process. The president recognizes the gravity of his choice to fill the seat left by Justice Scalia, one of the most steadfast protectors of our liberty and devotees of our Constitution that ever graced the bench. Whomever the president selects will be a worthy successor to the brilliant legal mind and constitutional dedication of Justice Scalia. It's our intention to start promptly tonight in the East Room at 8:02 p.m. Preset will begin at 6:30. The East Room will be available for live shots approximately 20 minutes following the announcements, and both the briefing room and Pebble Beach outside have extended hours tonight to accommodate any additional journalistic needs. We'll have further guidance on tonight's plans as the day evolves. Moving to the news of the day, I know that Secretary Kelly, alongside other DHS officials, just recently concluded a briefing on the operational implementation of the President's executive order. I think it's pretty clear from the Secretary's press conference that this executive order was enacted with the proper preparation and coordination between the White House and DHS, and that implementation will continue and proceed as planned. We also have a few updates on the leadership of some of our most critical government agencies. Last night, as you know, the President relieved Sally Yates of her duties as Acting Attorney General and named Dana Buente as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia to serve as the Acting Attorney General until Democratic senators finally quit their obstruction and confirmed the unquestionably qualified Senator Jeff Sessions as our next Attorney General. Ms. Yates failed to enforce a legal order approved by the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel and designed to protect the citizens of the United States. Calling for tougher vetting individuals from travelers from 7 nations is not extreme. It is reasonable and necessary to protect our country. Around 9 p.m. last night, the President signed an affidavit of nomination for Mr. Buente as one of his first official actions as in his new post as Acting Attorney General. He signed a memorandum rescinding Sally Yates' guidance regarding the President's executive order to ensure its full implementation. Last night, the President also announced the appointment of Thomas Homan as Acting Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security and Director of ICE. Mr. Homan has a long career at ICE, most recently serving as the Executive Associate Director for Enforcement and Removal Operations. Having a professional in place like this to serve as the acting director is critical to ensuring the efficient administration of the President's agenda. One other update from a story yesterday. I hope you all saw the statement that was put out from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where Chairman Dunford discussed the reorganization of the National Security Council, and he made it clear that he continues to fully participate in the interagency process and provide the best possible military advice to the President and members of the NSC. I really hope that that statement closes the book on the misleading narrative, and this should hopefully be the final time that we have to address what was in the National Security Directive. The family of the President the President also had a very somber and lengthy conversation with the family of Chief Petty Officer William Ryan Owens. The President offered his sincerest condolences to Officer Owens' wife, his father, and their 3 children. Chief Owens was on his 12th deployment, from what I understand. We could never repay the debt of gratitude we owe him, the freedom that he fought for, and the sacrifice that he made, as well as the other members of his unit who were injured in this operation. Today in the Senate, two of the president's nominees advanced out of the committee. The Energy and Natural Resources Committee approved the nominations of both Congressman Ryan Zinke as the next Interior Secretary and the nomination of former Texas Governor Rick Perry as the next Secretary of Energy. Elaine Chao also gratefully received the approval of the full Senate to become the next Secretary of Transportation. I expect further guidance on her official swearing in to come very soon. The Senate Democrats have done everything in their power to slow the work of the Senate, while the President continues to take decisive action, just like he promised during the thing. So it's unfortunate that Senate Democrats remain so out of touch with the message that the American people sent this past November. The people want change. President Trump is delivering that change, and the only response from Senate Democrats so far is to try to stall the core functions of our government. I know that I've repeated this every day, but honestly, it's getting a bit ridiculous. The idea that these highly qualified nominees have the votes for their nomination to be endorsed out of committee and get a full vote, or being stalled because Democrats are boycotting the committee votes, is outrageous. The mere idea that they're not even showing up to hearings is truly outrageous. So I'd like to give a special shout out to the folks at C-SPAN for making sure that all of these embarrassing actions by Senate Democrats get the wall-to-wall coverage that they deserve. Voters are going to remember what senators stood in the way of when President Trump trying to install his agency and department heads the next time their name is on a ballot. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but the numbers don't lie. 16 of President Trump's nominees to head major department and agencies are still waiting to be confirmed. At the same time, in 2009, President Obama only had 7 of these people waiting confirmation. In 2001, President Bush had all but 2. Moving on, here at the White House this morning, we reiterated the President's intention to continue to enforce the executive order protecting employees from the anti-LGBTQ discrimination while working for the federal government or contractors. Also this morning, the President had a breakfast and listening session with major pharmaceutical company executives in the Roosevelt Room. Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Celgene, Amgen, Eli Lilly, and the Pharma Trade Group were represented at the meeting. Chairman Greg Walden, chairman of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, also participated. During the meeting, the President commended their progress in lowering drug prices, but also reiterated his insistence that there's more work to be done. He promised to continue reducing the burdensome regulations that raise the cost of doing business in America. He was pleased to hear that the chairman of Amgen, Robert Braidway, discussed how 1,600 American jobs will be added by Amgen. This administration will continue to prioritize jobs and make it easier for businesses around this country to hire more Americans. The President had lunch with Mayor Giuliani just a short time ago, who serves as the CEO of an international security firm, Giuliani Partners, and was tapped by the President to lend his expertise to the administration's cyber efforts. Mayor Giuliani was asked to initiate this process because of his long and very successful government career in law enforcement and his 15 years in private sector security, providing solutions for the challenges that we face in the cyber world. During the transition, the President announced that he intended to host a series of meetings with senior corporate executives from companies that are facing challenges such as hacking, intrusions, disruptions, manipulations, theft of data and identities, and securing information from technological infrastructures. These are the same challenges facing the government that are facing public entities and businesses, and the President believes that solutions to these issues will often come from the private sector. Following the lunch with Mayor Giuliani, the President will host a listening session with the cybersecurity experts and Mayor Giuliani. No consensus or advice on the recommendations resulting from the group are widely expected, but we do expect a spirited, wide-ranging discussion regarding the growing cybersecurity threats that our nation is facing. Later this afternoon, the President will sign an executive order, or potentially sign one, that the federal government cybersecurity efforts and give leaders the tools they need to keep the country safe from cyber attacks. The order does 3 main things. It secures the federal networks we operate on behalf of the American people. It'll work with industry to protect critical infrastructure and maintain our way of life, and it will advance the cause of internet freedom. More information will be available later this afternoon, but the executive order is the first step in the President taking the address of new security challenges in the 21st century. The Vice President today participated in the Republican policy lunch in the Senate. He'll hold several meetings with members on Capitol Hill, the beginning of extensive outreach by our legislative affairs team on the President's Supreme Court choice. Tonight, the Vice President will swear in Elaine Chao, as I mentioned. We'll have further updates. We expect it to be at 5 o'clock in the ceremonial office across the way in the old Executive Office building. Secretary Chow is one of the most successful cabinet American officials in American history, having been the longest tenured Secretary of Labor since World War II, and also serving as the Deputy Secretary of Transportation under George H.W. Bush's administration. She's the perfect choice to lead the Department of Transportation into what promises to be a significant period of modernization and improvement. As I already mentioned, the last thing on our schedule for tonight is the President's announcement of the next Associate Justice for the Supreme Court. Tomorrow's the kickoff for Black History Month, and the White House is excited to host a series of events this month in recognition of it. In particular, the U.S. Post Office will hold a ceremony tomorrow celebrating the official issuance of the Dorothy Height Forever stamp. Dr. Height led the National Council of Negro Women for 4 decades and is a true pioneer in the civil rights movement. Finally, a couple administrative notes. On Friday, the President will depart from this White House to the Winter White House down at Mar-a-Lago, where he'll spend the weekend and be holding meetings. Further guidance on both trips will be coming out throughout the week. And I'm excited to announce that following up on our announcement of expanding the press briefing room to Skype seats, we'll officially be launching the briefing room tomorrow. The inaugural panelists will be Natalie Herbeck from Fox 8 in Cleveland, Ohio, Lars Larson of The Lars Larson Show, Jeff Joby from Joby Publishing in South Central Kentucky, and Kimberly Kalunian from WPRI in Rhode Island. Not sure how she snuck in there. I look forward to virtually welcoming them to the briefing room. And with that, some questions. John Roberts.
The removal last night of Ms. Yates from her position has raised questions as to how this president will deal with dissent in the ranks currently and in the future. Does he see what she said yesterday as a difference of opinion, an act of insubordination? How would he read it, and how will he act on similar things in the future?
Well, there's a big difference, John, between listening and sharing ideas and executing lawful orders. It is the right of every American to express their idea and opinion, and frankly, that's what you've seen the president do today. We're talking about leaving, at the 2 o'clock hour, him sitting down with cyber experts to get their opinions and ideas on how to protect our critical infrastructures. But there's a difference when she, as the acting attorney general, is not only responsible but required to execute lawful orders and defiantly says no. As someone who has chosen to lead a department, she was rightfully removed. That is a position of leadership that is given to somebody who is supposed to execute orders that are handed down to them properly, of which that executive order was 100% done. Ironically, it went through their offices, the Department of Justice Office of Legal Compliance. So the idea that it went through the entire process of which they were part of, and then she chooses not to execute it, actually is bewildering as well as defiant.
So is the president,
Right.
so sir, can I just follow up on that? So is the president laying down a marker now
He's not
to all of his cabinet secretaries and all of his other officials to say, if I give you a directive and you do not follow it, you're gone?
Well, I think that kind of comes with the job, right? If you don't believe in the president's agenda, and I think every one of the cabinet members, every one of the appointees understands that they serve at the pleasure of the president. We talked about this at length during the transition. This isn't about joining the government to execute your ideas or your initiatives. The president was very clear during the campaign, whether it's economic security or national security, that he has an agenda that he articulated very, very clearly to the American people. And that, hold on, thank you. And that it is his job to lay that vision out, and that the people that he appoints and nominates and announces as staff members or cabinet level members or agency heads, their job is to fulfill that. And if they don't like it, then they shouldn't take the job. But it is the president's agenda that we are fulfilling here. Trey.
Thanks, Sean. As it relates to the executive order today, how will the Trump administration ensure the digital privacy of all Americans as the president looks to strengthen U.S. cybersecurity?
Well, look, just to be clear on the executive order, I think one of the things that the reason the president wants Mayor Giuliani and some of these cyber experts to come in is to get their ideas, to make sure that where we're headed in cybersecurity is fulfilling the intent that ensures that our critical infrastructures throughout the government and frankly throughout business, to the extent that the government can be helpful in that, are protected and secured. So I just want to caution what we may or may not do today. I think the president's got a pretty good idea where he's going to go, but I think he wants to hear what Mayor Giuliani and some of these other experts have to say about the steps that we can take in terms of executive action that will help secure further these critical infrastructures. April.
Sean, I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to the issue of this travel ban.
Well, first of all, it's not a travel ban. I think you heard Secretary Kelly, and I apologize. I just want to make sure I get this straight. I think Secretary Kelly or one of the other individuals that got it there from DHS mentioned, I think 1 million people have now come into this country. That's not a ban. What it is to make sure that the people who are coming in are vetted properly from 7 countries that were identified by the Obama administration. A ban would mean people can't get in. We've clearly seen hundreds of thousands of people come into our country from other countries. Sorry.
Okay.
God.
But mind you, I have 2 questions.
I know, of course.
So with all of this happening, and as you're trying to give specifics about what's happening, what is the concern about the fallout from other countries who are viewing this still in a certain way? Have you looked at the fallout and how to counter it and how to work with these other countries that may be allies or even may not be allies in order to prevent something from happening?
Well, I think, April, one of the things that we're doing is trying to make sure that people understand what actually happened. You know, I saw reporting today that Secretary Kelly was out of the loop and he was on a plane and flying, and then it was it was reported on one of the networks and major institutions about what happened. Secretary Kelly comes out and says, I was briefed on this time, I was talked on this time, the edits came from my staff. I don't know how, I don't want to spend each of these briefings talking about misinformation, but at the end of the day, a major newspaper and a major network reported today that they were kept out of the loop. The secretary detailed multiple occasions in which he was briefed on it. His staff made edits to it. I don't know how much more, and so I think part of what we're trying to do is make sure that people actually understand what happened, what the process was, and what the order actually does. Because when we use words like travel ban, that misrepresents what it is. It's 7 countries previously identified by the Obama administration where, frankly, we don't get the information that we need for people coming into this country. Because what this isn't about is not just the people. It's about the information that another country provides us. So we work with other countries, and we have systems in place to ensure that when you